Okay, hello and welcome to part 6, the final section in the Viking dishwasher training. This final section will cover the service mode and the error codes. Okay, so we don't have the ability to test individual components on the Viking dishwasher, but you can get in to the service mode, and there are a number of things that you can do in that mode which are very helpful for diagnosing the problem. So to get into the service mode, you're going to press the on, off, and the settings button with the unit off. You're going to press and hold those, and the display will count down 3, 2, 1, and then the entire display will light up like you see here. Okay, once you do that, you're going to the display is going to change to HFT, which is an automated function test, and it's not used in the field. It's only used in the manufacturing plant. So you can just press the delay time plus once, and then it'll say IFT. This is an operator function test, also not used in the field. But press it one more time, and you're going to get to SFT, which is the service function test. And here you could run it through about a 15-minute test that will test all of the components. I'm going to come back to this in a second, but I'm going to show you what else is in the service mode. If you press the delay time plus again, EEP will appear in the display, and that's the EEPROM reset. So here you can reset the board back to its factory settings. So you just hit start pause, and it will reset the board. Okay, it'll say RST, and then it'll reset the board. Okay, so if there was a fault code like an EO1 or an EO2 showing that you got when you got there, that might show up in the service mode when you first get into it, and so you can go here and erase that. Okay, and then press delay time plus again, and it'll say DNO. Now this isn't something for a servicer, but this is the demo mode. This would be for like a showroom where you can plug the dishwasher in on a showroom and have it go light up and, draw the customer's attention to it. It is possible that it could be stuck in a demo mode, like if the customer buys one off of the showroom floor and they go to install it and they can't seem to get it to work. So to get it out of a demo mode, you would to get it into it, you press pause to activate it, and you would hold the on and off, the on-off key to cancel it. It'll count down and it'll cancel it. Press delay time plus again, and now you'll get to the board numbers. So D would be your main board number, A would be your display board number, and C would be your button board number. It'll just walk you through all of those. Delay time plus again, and you'll be back at the top of the menu. So it just cycles all the way around. This is what it looks like in real time. So with the unit off, you press and hold those two, and you can see it count down. All the icons come up. Okay, HFT. Now we can press the plus, IFT, go past that, and now we're at SFT. If we hit the start pause button, we'd get into that, but I'm going to bypass that. So here's your EEP. I'd hit the start pause to reset the board. There's your showroom mode. I'd hit start pause to turn that on. And here's your board numbers. And they go really fast, but they keep cycling around. And where you might need that is if a bulletin comes out that tells you to change your board if you have a certain board number. Here I'm going to get back to the service function test and hit start pause. And then close it. You can see the blue light came on, and now it's going to run through this service function test. Okay, so what is a service function test? Well, this is very small, and there's a lot of words on here. But basically, the gist of this is it's going to run through a test, and like I said, it's about 10 to 15 minutes long. It's going to fill with 0.36 gallons of water, and the fan is going to energize. Then it's going to drain for 60 seconds. Then the water valve is going to open and bring in about 1.2 gallons of water. And then the fan flap is going to change positions. That's the part that closes when the ionizer is used. Then the circulation pump is going to run for about 10 seconds through the upper spray arm. And it's going to run at about 2,800 RPM. Then the circulation pump and heater are going to come on. And plus the detergent dispenser, the door is going to open. And that's going to be about 3.3 minutes. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's going to go through a number of tests where it's testing each one of the components. At one point, it's going to pause and flash BSL, and that just stands for the Turkish word for start. And you're going to press the start pause key and close the door again, and then it's going to continue on with the test. The circulation pump is going to run for 60 seconds, and then it's going to drain for 30 seconds. Okay, so it's just going to run through that whole cycle automatically. You can't stop and test individual components. It's just going to automatically go through that. Now, if it encounters any problems with any of the components, it's going to throw a fault. Now, if the fault is a critical one, like I can't go on, like I don't have any water, it's going to stop and not allow it to continue. But for instance, if it's an E3, where it's not getting up to temperature, it'll continue washing and it'll finish the cycle, but it's going to say E3 to let you know that there was a fault with the heater not getting up to temperature, because right here it's supposed to get up to a particular temperature. Okay, so that's how the service function test works. And now I'm going to talk about the faults. There's only 10 possible faults you can have on this unit. And only 2 of them will be displayed to the customer. An EO1, which is a flood or an overflow, and an EO2, which means it's not getting any water. The unit doesn't store any fault codes, but they will show up in test mode, as I just mentioned. Okay, so let's look at the first one, the EO1. So it means an overflow fault. And as I mentioned before, it means this micro switch has been tripped, or it could be that there's an open circuit because this is normally closed. So it's normally closed and you have voltage running through it constantly. So if there's a leak not due to it being on, it will still throw that. It's a positive safety feature. So the fault is shown when the button on the microswitch is pressed or the wires going to the microswitch are broken or corroded. The normal state of this switch is closed, thus a break in the line will look the same as an activated button. When the button is pushed or the lines are broken, the machine goes into a standby mode and closes the water valve and initiates a 1-minute drain. The fault will remain if the button is pushed or the circuit is open. If the fault remains for 2 minutes, the cycle is canceled. Okay? Now, it will continue trying to pump that water out. 1 minute on, 1 minute off, 1 minute on, 1 minute off. It'll continue that forever. Until someone stops it. Okay, so you unplug it or deal with the problem. And they're doing that just because they're trying to mitigate any water getting into the customer's home. So what you want to check for is there any water in that base pan? Is it a real fault of an overflow? Check for a damaged microswitch if there's not any water down there, or broken wires, or a broken base pan. We've seen things underneath the dishwasher press up and hit that microswitch and cause it to give a false EO1. Then you want to check if there's any water inside the dishwasher. What would that indicate? That it's not draining. Okay, our dishwasher does not measure outgoing water. So it doesn't know if the water has left the machine. It only knows that it's run through the pump. Okay, so if there's a block, there's a block in the drain line, it's going to run and think all the water got out. Customer starts a new cycle. It fills up with water, but the old water is still in there and it's going to overflow. Okay, so that would be a blockage. Confirm that the drain pump works. You can easily do this by putting it into a service function test or simply just turning on a cycle, because the very first thing it does is run the pump. Ensure that the drain line is not blocked and search for leaks at various connection points. Okay, so an EO2 is a no water fault. Okay, so here it's saying I'm not getting any water, and the most common cause of this is that it's the customer's water is turned off. All right, the fault is shown when at least 0.15 gallons is not detected by the flow meter after 1 minute of fill time. See, it's looking for a certain amount of water, and if it's not getting that much within 1 minute, it's going to say, hey, there's no water. Customer could have very low water pressure, but as long as it gets to that amount of water within a minute, it's not going to throw that fault. The water valve will then shut off for about 4 minutes if this occurs, and then it'll energize the water valve for 30 seconds again after that. And it will continue this pattern until the water is restored. Okay, so obviously you want to make sure the water's turned on, ensure the harness is connected to the flow meter, that it's reading the water. Ensure the resistance on the fill valve is proper, around 900 ohms. If not, replace it. Inspect the flow meter for corrosion or damage. Replace the flow meter if found. If the flow meter is connected and appears to be in good condition, then it's probably the control board that's just not reading it properly, and you'll want to replace that. Okay, an EO3, we've already talked about this, the heater fault. So this is a temperature fault, not an electrical one. So it's basically, it's not reading an open circuit on the heater. It's saying it hasn't gotten up to the temperature it's required after the heater has been energized for 4 minutes, okay? It hasn't gotten to where it wants to be. So 3 minutes later, after it initially starts, it's going to take another reading. If the water temperature has not risen by approximately 37 degrees, then it's going to throw this fault. The dishwasher will continue with the cycle, and this fault will be stored in memory. Now, that's actually not true anymore. It won't be stored in memory, but when you run it through a service function test, it'll appear there. Okay. Ensure the harness to the heater is connected, that it's getting voltage. Ensure the heater has the proper resistance, 13 ohms, and you can measure it right here. If not, replace it. Ensure the NTC is a proper resistance. Again, that our NTC sensor is reading properly. And then if not, replace it. And if the heater and NTC check out, it's probably the control board. Okay, I've already mentioned this. An EO4 or an EO6 both have to do with the turbidity sensor. I really won't go into all the different scenarios. If you get that fault, it's just so easy to replace this. Go ahead and replace it. If there doesn't appear to be any damage, you may have a bad control board, but my guess would be with this rather than the control board. The EO5, I've mentioned this. It's basically that the multi-way valve is not getting to where it needs to be in the proper amount of time. And I've already shown you how to replace that. So it's going to try for 5 attempts to get to where it's supposed to go based on the cycle that your customer's chosen. And if it can't get there, it's going to throw this fault. Make sure the harnesses connect. Make sure the resistance of the motor is around 2K. Ensure the microswitch is operating properly and has no damage. Okay. EO7 is a continuous water fault. So this fault is shown if the flow meter is registering water outside of a normal fill time and exceeds 19 ounces. Okay. So if it's in a wash cycle and it's not calling for water, it's going to see this water coming in, going past the flow meter and say, hey, I shouldn't be getting water here, and it's going to throw this fault. If this occurs, the dishwasher will drain for 45 seconds, then wait 2 minutes before energizing the water valve again to take another flow meter reading. If the flow meter continues to read incoming water, the water valve will be open for 5 seconds and closed for 5 seconds 3 times. It will then wait a minute and take another flow meter reading. Basically, it's trying to get the water valve unstuck. If it continues to read incoming water, it will drain for 1 minute, pause for 1 minute, and so on until this is addressed. So obviously you want to check that the water valve has got the proper resistance. The water valve is normally closed and opens when it's energized. If no voltage is coming to the valve and water is still coming in, you've got a bad valve, okay? If voltage is coming to the water or from the board when it shouldn't be, then you've got a bad board and you should replace that. EO9 is a fault that you'll never really see in real time because it's a board fault. So if the display board is having a problem, it's not going to show any fault codes, okay? This fault will only be seen as a stored error code. If the display board is not functioning and is then replaced, this code may be found. And again, I say may because not all software now stores the fault codes, okay? If the display does not function, one of the first things you want to check is the door switch, because the door switch is supposed to be open when the door is closed. Okay, so when you close the door, that opens the switch. So obviously, if you have a bad switch or there's a corroded wire, it's going to look like the door is closed. Yeah, it's going to look like the door is closed, right? And so when the door is closed, the control board doesn't work, right? It's not going to function because it can't be controlled when the door is closed. So you can verify that you have voltage coming to the display, 5-volt DC, and you can see I'm testing it there. If not, inspect the harness, the plugs, and replace the control board if all those check out. A dry run error, I've already talked about this. This is where the amp draw is out of its normal operating range on the circulation pump because the motor's spinning too fast due to the lack of water. It's a protection for the heater. It just doesn't want the heater coming on if it's not getting any water. So make sure that you've got water in the dishwasher. Ensure that water isn't collecting in a bowl or a pan, and so not getting into the circulation pump. Make sure that's dumped out. If the water is present, everything else looks normal, you've probably got a bad circulation pump, and you should replace that. And then lastly, the low voltage error. And this is basically the board is not sensing the proper voltage. So you want to check the voltage from the house, make sure you've got proper voltage there, and then check the voltage coming into the machine or into the board. Make sure you've got proper voltage going into the board. If both of those are fine, you got a bad board, and go ahead and replace that. If it is the house or the cord, obviously make sure that that's addressed. Okay, those are all the fault codes. And that is the end of the Viking dishwasher training. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it helpful.